that's very, very dangerous.
Get these spidey sense, I was like, oh, something's off.
And I'm just like, man, I'm waiting to hear something,
Keep that crowd warmed up. Is Mr. Jehovah Tiger.
What's going on, guys, and welcome to the 34th? Welcome to the Warcry Podcast. I'm your host, Jehovah Tiger. Just kind of cooling, man. It's been a pretty busy, I'd say probably a couple weeks. I had to look over some pools and, get some athletic events going, athletic leagues, and if you can hear them in the background, I got the fans going. It's been hot, but I'm bringing you guys another episode of Observations. And if you don't know what Observations is, this is basically part 3, but Observation 3 is Observations is an episode to where there's certain things that I talk about, and there's certain things that I noticed and that I observed over the course of, a couple months. I think the last one was back in early June, maybe. And as I'm, I scroll through the internet, and I always, kind of have a good beat on what's going on. And, but something came across my timeline that I found very interesting. And it has to do with the Amazon rainforest. And there was a guy, I've seen a few interviews of his, but his name is Paul Rosie, I believe is how you pronounce it, or Rosalie. And he's been on Joe Rogan's podcast. He's been on kind of some other lesser-known podcasts. But he is kind of so basically this guy's a college dropout. High school dropout, got his GED, went to college, didn't really care for it. Then kind of made his way to the Amazon and into Peru and the western part of the Amazon. And one thing that really struck me about this guy is that he talks about snakes. He talks about these monster snakes that he's running into and that he sees in the Amazon. And I think the record for pythons is like 18 feet, which is like a monster snake. But he talks about there's bigger snakes out there, and there's local legends of bigger snakes. And he tells a story about a time when him and his partner were out basically trying to preserve the Amazon. Because the Amazon at one point was burning. I know that was in the headlines, and everybody was like, oh, send your $20 to the Amazon. Make sure that money saves it. Come on now, y'all. That money ain't saving nothing. That money is being spent somewhere else to do things that we have no idea what's going on. And I may end up talking about charities. Yeah, but we'll save that for another time, I suppose. But so anyways, he was on the front lines, and he posted a viral video basically of a fire burning down. And he was saying that basically 80% of those fires that were started by humans. People started them. And I thought that was very interesting because when he was talking about it, he then kind of goes into his time in the rainforest and some of these interviews I was watching. And he said basically there's certain parts of the Amazon that's like swamp. Like it's like a swamp area. And these snakes, hide in this swamp. And he was like, well, how do I get there? And the locals were like, well, you need to do this, this, and this, go this way. Like, there's no sense of direction in the Amazon. Like, you're just forced. But, like, there's landmarks or there's certain, like, weird, trees or markers. And so they finally get to this swamp area. And he looks out, and it looks like grass. It looks like the savannah. There's trees. You can see that there's trees, but there's like a prairie-looking area. And they're walking, and they notice, they're like, hold on. When they took their step, the ground shook. And they were like, what's going on? Well, come to find out, where these big snakes live are basically it's a canopy that's flooded in a low-lying area. So imagine like New Orleans, and it's flooded, but the trees are still growing, and they grow to the level. So basically, they're stepping on tree leaves, essentially. That's grown into moss and things like that, where that type of vegetation grows. Well, this Paul Rosalie, sees this kind of tree trunk looking thing kind of laying off to the edge of this kind of area. And he goes, and this one thing is about this dude's crazy. He's so crazy. But he goes and jumps on this tree log looking thing, and he realizes it's a 25-foot snake, python. I'm sorry, not python, anaconda. 25 feet. And he estimated that it was probably over 100 years old, and it's seen a lot of life. But these animals are so secluded and so, scared of humans because they've never seen them, that they hide, and that's how they get big. Is they just keep eating, and they get monster size. And he said it was a female, it was 25 foot, and he couldn't even put his arms around it. And that kind of makes me think of things that are here, that decide to remain hidden. And I always think, if it's in the Amazon and they're finding 25, 30 foot pythons, and we're not always around. Like, the forest is not, there's a lot of places that people haven't been or very much. And we act like, I think with Western society and, I call it European society, and it kind of goes into a lot of other things too, that I'm going to talk about here in a second. But, they have to see it to believe it. We think that we're the smartest things on the planet. We think, they did at the time. The Amazon allegedly, now I'm going to say allegedly, Europeans, this is Spaniards that were down there that got that place. And I can't remember the explorer's name. But basically the first guy who ever touched outside these uncontacted tribes at the time basically said that the Amazon had millions of people. And then 100 years later, there was nothing. That is, for my natives out there, y'all have heard this story before. But this was hundreds of years before they even knew about anything about Indians. That the Amazon had things going, like we had millions of people and, crazy cities the size of New York now. Well, then 50 years later, the Amazon, the nature is undefeated. It took it back. And in a short amount of time, these people were wiped out. They're gone. An interesting fact that's come up, and I know the National Geographic tried to debunk this, but this is the context. A lot of the fruit and vegetation that's edible in the Amazon came from those people. Those indigenous people that were planting and they were doing what they call it, leveling or like plateau. I know the Chinese do it. They do it. They basically will flatten a piece of land and let the runoff water itself. So when it rains, it runs off into, the water, into the plants, and it basically waters itself because of the ecosystem. So you're going to get a bustling, amount of produce and food. I know the National Geographic. That's one thing about. I call it, I always like to call it European science, because that's one thing about science is you have to always question it. You never can say for sure if something is for sure until it's for sure. But it's always changing. And, I always talk about, this podcast is, about spooky things. And I've heard, I'd ask people on a regular basis about spooky things. Oh, you heard anything? Or, oh, I don't believe in I don't believe in ghosts, or I don't believe in, Bigfoot, or I don't believe in Dogman, or I don't believe in Skilly, or I don't believe none of that. I don't believe in honkas, monsters, in the dark. But someone's always a honka to somebody. And that's something to put into perspective. And just because these, people don't, you don't believe that this is real, doesn't mean it's not real to somebody. And I think that's one thing that drives me crazy when I see scientists coming out. Neil deGrasse Tyson's a big one for me, that I cannot stand hearing his voice. I can't stand. He comes up with, he always has an answer for the unexplained, but the unexplained is the unexplained for a reason. And he even and I've heard him call it, the mainstream narrative of things. And that's an observation that I've made just from that little, Amazon, you got the National Geographic. Everyone in their mama knows what that is. And one scientist who's backed up by multiple archaeologists, a journalist who has done some investigative work, backed up by multiple archaeologists saying, hey, there's some things going on that were man-made here in the Amazon. But then what happened is the National Geographic goes, oh, well, this, it's this context, it's false. Fact checking people. Well, then, the president of the country, I think it's Peru, of the western part of the Amazon, goes, oh, well, if we created it, let's burn it down. If we kill these things, they'll grow back. It'll grow back. And that's, we can always look back to governments doing those things to people. We look at the pipeline up in the Dakotas. We can always look at, it's kind of a hot topic now. Everybody's talking about it, but you're looking at the Osage murders and how the Osage, they found black gold. The government said, oh, y'all can have that piece of terrible land out there in the plains where there's no trees, hardly any water. Y'all can have that. And guess what? They tapped into something that, Big Daddy wanted. And when Fed gets it, Fed sees it, they want it, they'll get it. They'll send the entire platoon, the entire army, they'll send whatever they need to do. And kind of piggybacking off that thought, I think of a guy who I used to work with, and he was in the military. I can't remember what branch he was in, but I was at a dead end job. I hate, just not doing really well in life, and kind of at a weird spot where I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I had run into this guy, and he was odd. Like, he was a weird guy. Like, he just didn't talk much, wasn't very outgoing, didn't really say much. But he was over in Afghanistan. And one day we were driving around, and we were, trying to make sales on stuff and talking to people, and I see his dog tag kind of shine through his shirt. You can kind of see it, and I was like, "Oh man, I didn't know you served. I did the usual. Oh, I appreciate your service." He kind of looked at me and I could tell it annoyed him, but he had about 5 or 6 dog tags, on his chain. And I said, "Man, I'm sorry. That's, your whole platoon, your squad, or I don't know the wording for it, man. I'm not a military guy, but he goes, and he kind of looked at me because he knew I was Indian. He said, we kind of did the same thing. We're doing the same thing over there that we did to y'all." And I looked at him, and he goes, "My entire deployment was protecting poppy fields." And I looked at him and I said, "What do you mean? Like to make opium, stuff like that?" He goes, "Yep." is I lost these 5 people protecting a drug, protecting a plant. That's way cheaper there than it is anywhere in the world because we stole it. And it kind of hit me in a weird spot, and I think about that quite often. You know, I didn't really know what to say. I always have something to say. But he kind of put me in my spot where I didn't really know what to say. And it kind of hit me in a weird spot. And, you know, I know Res Dogs is going on. I know that I haven't seen any episodes, and I always kind of think about those things. And I know the latest episode has a sad story, sad connotation with the schools and whatnot. And I was, with him saying that, this is what we did to y'all, we're doing the same thing to them. And I see people who carry water for that. And I'm spicy right here. I'm gonna say this. I see, and it's both ways. It ain't one way, it ain't left, it ain't right. But I see a lot of people carrying water for these things in the Indian community. And it kind of makes me think, are we carrying this water because of the indoctrination? Are we carrying this water because of a agenda? Or are we, trying not to get canceled? What are we doing? I always make that observation that we hop on trends for things. A lot of times we play, I'm speaking for Indian people because I'm Indian. I can say these things. And, this may ruffle some people the wrong way. Like, I had my grandmother was I can play it too. We all can play it. We all have family members that were hurt, and still hurt. And one thing that, I think that we do as a people that drives me kind of nuts, and I mentioned this on the last episode about Res Dogs, is that we do this thing where we try to play the oppression Olympics with everybody. And we have people out here making it. Like, we have legitimate people out here making it. Doing things. Doing the right thing. Entrepreneurs. We got teachers. We got coaches. We got athletes that are doing things. And we focus on we do the head turn where we look back instead of look forward. And there's things and times to bring up these past facts. These painful facts, and sometimes it's not all the time. Sometimes it's when it means the most is when we bring those things up. And I see that a lot. And to see some of the feedback from that Res Dog, I haven't seen it. Now, granted, I'm not going to speak on the actual episode, but I'm speaking on what I've seen in terms of the feedback. That's a time and place to talk about that. That's a perfect time because for the Native community, we're at the highest level of sight. I used to, I think about my grandpa a lot. Man, when he was at Bacone, he says it's better to just hide in the shadows sometimes, and we've done that. He would basically kind of hide, or not really hide, but he just would sit back and, people get fired or let go, and he'd still be there. He's still trucking along. He's just staying quiet and staying diligent, and he stayed on. And he had somebody ask him, like, "Dang, Yahola, you still here? Junior, you still here? Dang, I thought you got let go." He said, "No, I'm still here because I've been hanging out, been keeping it status quo." And sometimes that's a bad thing, but in some certain times it is what's necessary. And this podcast it has opinions. I have opinions that are different than some people, a lot of people, and I don't see things red or blue. I don't see things purple. I see things my way. Yahola Anthony Tiger IV. And if you agree with me, you don't, hey, it is what it is. At the same time, though, I like to make sure that, I want, make sure we get both sides of the story. and not just one side, because they always say there's three sides to each truth. There's yours, mine, and the truth. And this podcast, I try to do that. I try to get as close to fact, as close to the truth, because with the This Is Creepy episode, people are telling me their truth. I believe them. I believe that these things happen to them. When people are telling me their experiences in life, and I believe them. I believe them. And so, that's just that kind of going back to the Res Dogs. It's that's a perfect time. You had a few episodes kind of funny, and then you get hit hard. It's like that 1923 Yellowstone prequel episode where you got to what do they say? Kill the savage, save the man. And that's something I deal, and I not really deal with, but in my daily life, and being in certain areas where I'm at, I always get sometimes, oh, well, you need to cooperate. You need to be like us. And I don't think it's any way. I don't think it's a racist thing. I don't think it's that. I just think that I come from Tahlequah, Oklahoma. It's different. I know some people coming off Muskogee Creek Res. They were different. They're different. Maybe these people from out of out of the state, maybe they don't understand that. They don't understand that. We're different. I'm different. I'm not like maybe anyone they've ever dealt with. Maybe I'm too vocal. Maybe I speak my opinion too much. I don't know. But that those episodes really have hit home with me, and I've really thought about them. I've really put in a lot of thought about what's going on in those episodes, and I just wanted to share what I observed and kind of what I think. And that's kind of what, like I said, what this episode's about. And like I said, at the end of the day, man, we can agree to disagree. I still appreciate you listening. If you're hearing this and you're like, man, Yahola's insensitive to the cause. Because, at the end of the day, we are one people. We all come from the same Creator. And I appreciate you listening still. If you're getting kind of tight on that, because it's pretty spicy nowadays. Anyone can be canceled for anything. It's like the lady. Here's another crazy thing that that I've kind of observed is the lady that that MFer right there is not real. That lady on the plane, I guess, I don't know if she's from Oklahoma. Someone said, I saw that, maybe she might be from Oklahoma. I don't know, but, the conspiracy, and we'll talk, like I said, we're going to pivot a little bit, but, that's been going around for a minute. And so what comes out is that she was sitting at the back of the plane, and she allegedly said that there was a man in a hood who she couldn't see his face, but he said, I'm going to, do some things to the plane. I ain't going to say it because Lord knows they'd be like, oh, we got to get him off. We got to get him off the air. Got to get him. He's speaking too much. No. But said someone with no face, no discernible features said that they're going to do something to the plane. The weird part about this, she gets on TikTok, or she gets on Twitter. Never, like, freshly made Twitter. This is very strange. Like I said, it's very strange. Creates a Twitter, buys the Twitter blue with the check mark to make sure she's real, tell people she's real, or that she's verified, or whatever, whatever they say. And makes his video and goes out and says, hey, this is what happened. If you think I'm crazy, blah, 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 explaining the whole situation. TikTok is undefeated. TikTok people go and find her IP address. And they show a basic regular IP address. So like, for instance, from my house, they could see, oh, he's here. And it always starts with a certain number and a certain, I guess, numerical phrase where you know it's a household. Hers is not. Hers comes from D.C., Washington, D.C., and a possible government IP address. So I find that very interesting. At the same time that's going on, we got Joe Nicholslick is what I call him. Y'all can decipher that. But Joe Nicholslick is doing some things and trying to send more money over to a country that we're not going to name. So everybody's distracted. Your tax, your it's like 9/11. We'll get into that. But Donald Rumsfeld, the day before 9/11 hit, he goes, "Hey, we're missing like $8 trillion. We don't know where it went. We don't know where that money's at." And it just happened the next day. 9/11 happens. Pentagon's hit in the same spot where they keep the accounting numbers. So that year they wiped the budget. So it's just very interesting. There's that's some observations I've made on some things, and I just found that very interesting. I kind of, I like me a conspiracy, but I also like me movies too as well. So I want you guys to watch a movie. For my natives out there, I consider this a native movie, but it is a very good movie. I really enjoyed it. My dad actually put me onto this, and he was like, "Hey, we need to sit down," and we rented it. Okay, let me talk about my dad for a second. This man is so cheap. He will never in his life rent a movie. There's been blockbuster hits that he's actually wanted to see, and he's like, "Nah, we're not renting it. We're not doing the Redbox rent." And I'm looking at him like, "Dang, Dad, come on, it's $1.99. You can part with $1.99 right now. It ain't gonna kill you." This man literally goes and rents this movie for $7.99. Rents the movie for $7.99. He could have bought it for $7.99. Because this movie is such a good movie for him, and then now I love it. But the movie is called Wolfen. The movie is about basically New York. New York is going through the worst economic times, and you got all these random murders happening. And the movie starts out, and I cannot for the life of me remember this guy's name, but he's been in a lot of movies. But he's a young guy in this movie. He usually plays like an old guy, like he's like usually an older guy, like an older guy, like action movie. But there's a detective, and he's the detective. Is kind of down on his luck, or not really at the top of his game. But this case of this rich couple basically murdered in the park, and their cab driver is killed in this park, in this affluent park. So they're basically trying to solve the case. Well, the medical examiner, which the dad from Family Matters is in this too, I think, as well. The guy, the mustache, he's a younger guy in that movie. And they're like, "Hey, this is an animal attack. This is a wolf attack." And so the urban legend in New York at the time is that there were coyotes or quote unquote coy wolves running around the streets at night, and sometimes they'd kill homeless people. At this time, that's history right there. But in the movie, they can't explain these wolf attacks. So the detective teams up with a I think it's like an anthropologist or another detective or cop or somebody. I can't remember exactly, but team up and they try to find this, and the medical examiner too, team up to find this wolf and to track this wolf down. One thing I love about this movie, and this is one thing that I really enjoy, is the Native American aspect of it. So during the middle of the movie, the detective goes to this native, and I can't remember that this guy's he's a Mexican guy, which I count it as a native movie, but it takes some hits because they don't cast no natives in it. They just Hispanic people basically. And the guy that plays the main native in this is he's actually Mexican. He's been in a bunch of movies, and he's just a young guy in this movie. And so he's really big into skyscrapers, and they always say that those Indians showed the Europeans how to build bridges back in the day. And so this native, he's real astute in bridges, and he stands on bridges. And so the detective goes and sees him, because they're all working on the the bridge. And this is kind of a funny thing, but I used to laugh, because like you always see like the shaman, I'm gonna put a curse on you. Well, he does that to this detective. He's like, hey, you never know. I might be a wolf. I might be the one you're looking for. And he proceeds to basically act like he turns into a wolf and he's going to eat the detective. The detective freaks out. He's like, oh no. And so that goes on. And in that moment I laughed because I remember being like in second grade, and this little white girl, I used to say, oh, I'm a shapeshifter. I can shift into a fox, and I used to, just messing around. And I remember I've seen that too, like in other movies. I know it's kind of a trope or a cliche, but I used to laugh. I used to kind of, mess around. But I've seen other people do it too. And I know everyone's probably done it. Try to scare people, try and get, I'll turn into this and I'll eat you or whatever, But he does the same thing to the detective. And there's a scene, and I'm going to put that scene in now to let you listen to it.
It's not wolves, it's wolfing. For 20,000 years, Wilson. 10 times your fucking Christian era. The skins and the wolves, the great hunting nations lived together. Nature in balance. Then the slaughter came. The smartest ones, they went underground. Into the new wilderness, your cities. Into the great slum areas, the graveyard of your fucking species.
These great hunters became your scavengers. Your garbage, your abandoned people became their new meat animal. Their own
Animals? Are you sure, Wilson? They might be gods.
In their eyes, you are the savage.
So that scene is towards the end, and basically they describe what wolfing is. And I'm not gonna, like I said, I'm not gonna ruin it because there's more to the movie. But we always, I always see, and this is another observation that I see on TikTok, and I've said this on Bigfoot Crossroads too. I kind of push back on that, but I see a lot of non-natives talking about skinwalkers and shapeshifters as if they're cryptids or a monster or a being. And yeah, I guess you could say that they are, in a sense of what they're talking about, but these things have been going on for a long time, and they're people. They're not beings. Now, wolfing is a being. In this movie, it's a being, but the observation I'm making is that I see people acting as if, these skinwalkers are animals or beasts, and they're not. They're people with intentions. And that's one thing too that I'm pushing back on is non-natives, acting as if it's just some light thing to talk about. There's people out here that know things, and I always want to preface this with respect, because I have respect for these things, because I believe in these things. But one thing that I see all the time is just throwing it out there. Oh, everything's a skinwalker, or that's a skinwalker. There was a alien looking thing, and they called that a skinwalker, and I'm just like, yeah, okay. But with Wolfen, with it being a being that's been pushed back, that's a lot of, I think, a metaphor to me that there's been a lot of our myths and legends that have been put back in the closet, or have been put back into a box, or any other metaphor you can use for being pushed back for whatever. Oh, well, with Spirit Talkers podcast, we talked about the winter spirits and depression, those things. We use the clinical medicine, clinical diagnosis for these entities and these beings that affect us. And that's similar to what the Wolfen is. The Wolfen was a powerful being back, 20,000 years ago, like you heard in that scene, being relegated to, a scavenger, a bottom-feeding entity, and the Wolfen got tired of it, and so you'll have to check that movie out. It's a great movie. I really I cannot say enough about it. I appreciate my dad renting that for $7.99 and killing his bank account. Now he's broke. No, I'm just kidding. But that's one thing I love about certain movies like that. Cult classics is just, man, it's just a hidden gem. It's just it's good like that. But we're sitting at almost 40 minutes. I guess I've been talking way too much, but I always appreciate you guys listening, man. We together, you listening, me talking and blabbering, we're almost at 8,000 audio listens and downloads for the podcast. And I appreciate it. It's grown. We're almost at 200 followers on Spotify, which is awesome. Share this podcast out. Get it out to everybody. I know I have had family members do it, and I appreciate it. I got a cousin right now. I'll say her name, Mary Cawley. She does bead work that I'd like to promote, and so you should go find her on Facebook. You need some bead work done. She has some pretty keen medallions, and so y'all need to go check her out on Facebook. Mary Cawley, Kaulae. I'm sorry, A-Y. Jesus, it's been a long day. Anyways, but yeah, go check her out. And this last part I want to talk about, because this is a big observation that I've noticed, and kind of something that I'm very passionate about. So my great aunt Judy Pickering is running for Muskogee National Council, seat A out of the Eufaula district. And one thing that I want to say about my aunt and in my promotion of her is that there was never a time where she hadn't taken care of somebody. There's never a time where she hadn't put someone else before herself and served others. She, along with some of my other family members and family friends, have been, shouldering the load of the Eufaula Canadian tribal town since my grandpa's passed. And I got a lot of respect for that. And I believe in my heart that she is the one for that seat. And I'm going to speak it out now. Judy Pickering for that seat A in Eufaula District, for Muskogee National Council, Muskogee Creek Nation National Council. She's out the Raccoon Clan. Her grandparents. I'm named after the original Yehola Senior. I take real pride in my name, but I also take pride in that last name too. I'm very proud of my family, especially my Creek family. I got my Uncle John, Mark, Tiger. He's world renowned. I call him world renowned. He's famous to me. I always looked in awe of him. And same thing with Judy. She had served the Muskogee Creek tribe for a lot of years, making sure our elders were right. And now she's trying to, pass on the language to the kids and everybody. And so I want to say this now. If you're Muskogee Creek and you're in that Eufaula District, CA, I need you to go vote for my Aunt Judy Pickering. Judith Pickering is what it's listed as, but I call her, she's Judy to me, Aunt Judy. So go out and vote. That's one thing we got to do. Get out and vote. Make sure we get our people in that speak for us, that have our values, and make sure that things are right. But vote Judith Pickering, and you guys can follow me on TikTok, Warcry Podcast or Warcry Pod on TikTok, One Man Band on Twitter, Warcry Pod on Instagram, YouTube, Warcry Podcast. It's available everywhere. Obviously, you're listening to it now. Eufaula Tiger Facebook. I appreciate everybody that sent messages, sent stories, telling me they love the podcast. It means a lot to me. You've sent their stories. This is an announcement right now. This is Creepy 3 is coming August 28th. Man, there's some top of the line stories, and I appreciate. I got stories out of Purim. I got stories out of First Nations tribes. I got stories out of Concho. I got the casino out there in Concho. I got stories out of Locust Grove. I got stories all over the place. And so I appreciate, Purim's another one. I got another one out of Purim. I appreciate that story. But August 28th, this is Creepy 3. It's going on a Monday. You're not going to want to miss it. Make sure you like, subscribe, share. Let people know, hey, there's some creepy stories coming. So if you want to get spooked out at night, this is the time. But like I said, I appreciate you guys listening in, and I'll catch you on the next one.